The root of fear in Buddhism. It's not what you think. What are you afraid of? Take a moment. Don't answer too quickly. Let the question sit with you. Maybe it's the job interview next week. You've prepared, you've rehearsed your answers, but there's still that knot in your stomach that won't go away. Maybe it's the project deadline you're not sure you can meet. And every time you think about it, your chest tightens. Maybe it's something you don't want to admit out loud, like the fear of checking your phone because there might be bad news waiting. A message from someone you're not ready to hear from. A call from the hospital you're afraid to answer. Or maybe it's something quieter. Something that comes to you at night when everything is still. The fear of the future. Not knowing where your life is going. Not knowing if the choices you've made are the right ones. Not knowing if you'll ever feel safe, or settled, or enough. Fear has so many faces. It shows up when you stand in front of a crowd and suddenly forget everything you wanted to say. It shows up when you look at your bank account at the end of the month. It shows up when you think about getting older, about losing the people you love, about being left behind. But here's something strange. No matter what shape fear takes, whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of death, or even the fear of a spider in the corner of your room, the feeling inside is almost always the same. Your heart beats faster. Your hands get cold. Your stomach tightens. Your mind starts spinning, jumping from one worst-case scenario to another. If every fear creates the same feeling in the body, the same reaction in the mind, then maybe we need to ask a deeper question. Are we really afraid of all these different things? Or are we all, underneath it all, afraid of the same thing? Let's try something together. Think of a fear you have right now. It doesn't have to be something dramatic. It can be something many of us carry, like the fear of losing your job. Now, let's go beneath the surface. Let's ask, why? You're afraid of losing your job. Why? Because you won't be able to provide for your family. Okay, but why is that so terrifying? Because people will see you as a failure. They'll think you're not capable, not good enough. And why does that frighten you so much? Because if you're not good enough, then maybe you don't deserve to be loved. Maybe you'll be abandoned. Maybe you'll become invisible, like you don't matter at all. Do you see what just happened? We started with a fear of losing a job, something concrete, something external. And within a few questions, we arrived somewhere much deeper. The fear of not being worthy. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of disappearing. Let's try another one. You're afraid of snakes. Why? Because they might bite you. And why is that scary? Because you could die. And why is death so frightening? This is where it gets harder to answer. You're afraid of death because you're afraid of not existing anymore. You're afraid that everything you are, your memories, your dreams, your loves, your struggles, will simply vanish, as if you were never here at all. Now, you might be thinking, but the fear of snakes has nothing to do with the self. That's just survival instinct. It's biology. And you're right. It is survival instinct. But what is survival instinct, if not the protection of me at the most basic level? This body, this life, it's the foundation of everything you call yourself. Your name, your memories, your relationships, your dreams, all of it depends on this body being alive. Lose that, and you lose everything. So even the most primal fear, the fear that seems purely physical, purely instinctive, is still, at its core, the fear of losing the self. Now, notice something. We started with two very different fears: the fear of losing a job and the fear of snakes. But when we kept asking why, we ended up in the same place. The fear of loss, the fear of separation, the fear of ceasing to exist, the fear that this me, this person I've spent my whole life building and protecting, might one day be gone. This is what I want you to see. The fears we experience on the surface are just the outer layer. They're like the tip of an iceberg. Beneath them, there are deeper fears. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being worthy. And at the very bottom, there's something even more primal. A fear that most of us don't even know we carry. The fear of losing ourselves. More than 2,600 years ago, the Buddha looked deeply into the nature of fear, and what he discovered is still true today. In the Dhammapada, one of the most beloved collections of his teachings, there's a series of verses that speak directly to this. Verse 212 says, "From endearment springs grief, from endearment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from endearment, there is no grief, whence then fear." And verse 214 continues, "From attachment springs grief, from attachment springs fear. For one who is wholly free from attachment, there is no grief, whence then fear." Now, when we first hear this, it might sound harsh. Is the Buddha telling us not to love? Not to care about anyone or anything? No, that's not what he's saying. What he's pointing to is something much more subtle. He's saying that whenever we cling to something, whenever we hold on tightly and say, "This is mine, this must stay, this cannot change," we automatically create the conditions for fear. Because deep down, we know that nothing stays the same. Everything we love will change. Everyone we hold dear will one day be gone. And so, the tighter we grip, the more we fear losing. Think about it in your own life. You cling to your job, and so you fear unemployment. You cling to a relationship, and so you fear rejection or abandonment. You cling to your health, and so you fear sickness. You cling to life itself, and so you fear death. Fear and clinging are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. But the Buddha went even deeper. He didn't just say, attachment causes fear, and leave it there. He showed us the roots, the deep hidden causes that keep us trapped in this cycle. The first root is what he called avijja, often translated as ignorance. But it's not ignorance in the sense of lacking information. It's something more like not seeing clearly. We don't see the true nature of things. We believe that things should be permanent, stable, under our control. But reality doesn't work that way. Everything is changing. Our bodies, our relationships, our feelings, our thoughts. And when we don't accept this, when we fight against the natural flow of life, fear arises. The second root is tanha, craving. This is the intense wanting, the thirst that drives so much of our lives. We crave pleasure, success, security, love. And there's nothing wrong with wanting good things. But here's the catch. The more intensely we crave something, the more we fear not getting it, or losing it once we have it. Craving and fear feed each other. In his very first teaching, recorded in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha identified craving as the origin of suffering. He even spoke of bhava tanha, the craving for existence, the desperate need to keep being, and vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence, the wish to escape or disappear. Both of these are forms of fear in disguise. The third root is the deepest and most hidden. It's the belief in a fixed, permanent self. What the Buddhist texts call attavadupadana, clinging to the idea of I and mine. We spend our whole lives building this self. We give it a name, a history, a personality. We dress it up with achievements and protect it from criticism. And we believe, without ever questioning it, that this self is solid, real, and must be defended at all costs. Now you might be thinking, but I've never consciously thought about a self. How can I be clinging to something I don't even know exists? But the belief in a self doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your reactions. Every time you feel offended, something is being offended. Every time you defend yourself or feel the sting of criticism, there it is. You don't need to know what the self is in order to protect it. You've been doing it your whole life. Automatically. Instinctively. That's what makes it so hard to see. But the Buddha asked a radical question. Is this self really what you think it is? In the Anattalakkhana Sutta, he examined what we usually call me. The body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, and showed that none of these are permanent. None of these are under our complete control, and none of these can be said to be a fixed, unchanging self. Form is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Mental formations are not self. Consciousness is not self. This might sound abstract, but the implication is very practical. If there is no fixed self that needs to be protected, then what is there to fear? Fear needs an object. It needs a me that can be threatened. But if that me is not as solid as we thought, if it's more like a river than a rock, more like a process than a thing, then fear begins to lose its grip. This is the true root of fear. The belief that there is something here that can be lost. So what do we do with all of this? If you've followed me this far, you might be feeling something. Maybe it's a sense of recognition. Yes, this is what I've been experiencing. Or maybe it's discomfort. If there's no self, then what am I? What's the point of anything? Let me share something that might help. In the Bhaya-bhairava Sutta, the discourse on fear and dread, the Buddha tells the story of his own practice before he became awakened. He would go deep into the forest, to places that were considered frightening, the kind of places where even experienced ascetics would feel their hair stand on end. And he was honest. He said that when he sat alone in the darkness, and he heard a sound, a deer walking by, a peacock knocking down a branch, the wind rustling the leaves, fear and dread would arise in him. He didn't pretend he was above fear. He didn't claim some special immunity. He simply acknowledged, fear is here. But here's what he did differently. He didn't run. He didn't try to distract himself. He didn't push the fear away or pretend it wasn't there. In his own words, when fear and terror came to me while I was walking, I would not stand or sit or lie down until I had subdued that fear and terror while walking. When fear and terror came to me while I was standing, sitting, lying down, I would keep in that same posture until I had subdued that fear and terror. He stayed with it. He faced it directly, and in facing it, he understood it. This is perhaps the most important shift we can make in our relationship with fear. Fear is not an enemy to be destroyed. It's not a weakness to be ashamed of. Fear is a signal. It's a messenger. And what is it telling you? It's telling you, there's something here you're holding on to too tightly. Every time fear arises, it's pointing to a place where you're clinging, to an outcome, to a relationship, to an image of yourself, to the idea that things should be a certain way. Fear is not the problem. The clinging is. So here's a simple practice you can try. The next time fear shows up, whether it's before a difficult conversation, or in the middle of the night when your mind won't stop racing, or when you think about something you might lose, don't run from it. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Don't immediately reach for your phone to distract yourself. Just stop and notice. Say to yourself, "Fear is here." Then ask, "What am I really afraid of?" And keep asking. Go deeper, layer by layer. What's beneath this fear? And beneath that? And beneath that? You might be surprised what you find. You might discover that beneath the fear of a specific event, there's a fear of failure. Beneath the fear of failure, there's a fear of rejection. Beneath the fear of rejection, there's a fear of being unworthy of love. And beneath all of that, there's the primal fear of disappearing, of not being, of losing the me you've spent your whole life constructing. And when you get there, to the very bottom, something interesting happens. You realize that the fear doesn't have a solid foundation. It's built on an idea of yourself that isn't as fixed as you thought. It's like a wave on the ocean. It rises. It has energy. It feels very real. But it's not separate from the water. It comes and it goes. Fear is not what you are. It's something that passes through. So let me ask you again. What are you really afraid of? By now, you might have a different answer than when we started. It's not the job. It's not the interview. It's not even death, really. Those are just the forms fear takes. The root is always the same. The clinging to a self that we believe must be protected. And this is both the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that you can't solve fear by solving each individual problem. You can't make enough money to feel completely secure. You can't achieve enough success to never fear failure again. You can't hold on tightly enough to the people you love to guarantee they'll never leave. Life doesn't work that way. But the good news is that you don't have to fight 1,000 different fears. You only have to look at one root. When you see clearly, not just intellectually, but in your own direct experience, that the self you've been protecting is not a fixed thing, that it's a process, a flow, a story you've been telling yourself, then fear begins to loosen its grip. Not because you've suppressed it, but because there's less and less for it to attach to. In the Dhammapada, verse 385, the Buddha describes the one who has found this freedom. He for whom there is neither this shore nor the other shore, nor yet both. He who is free of cares and is unfettered. Him do I call a holy man. Neither this shore nor the other shore. What does that mean? In Buddhist teachings, this shore refers to the world of clinging, being caught in the pull of our senses, our desires, our attachments. The other shore refers to liberation, the deathless, what the Buddha called nibbana. But here's what's remarkable about this verse. Even liberation is not something to cling to. The one who is truly free doesn't grasp at this shore, the world of attachment. But they also don't cling to the other shore, turning liberation itself into another possession, another identity, another thing the self can claim as mine. This is not about escaping life or disappearing. That would just be another form of fear. true freedom is something else entirely. It's being fully in life, loving, working, creating, connecting, but without the tight grip. It's caring deeply, but not clinging desperately. It's living completely, but not terrified of loss. You don't need to become a different person to find this freedom. You don't need to renounce your life or sit in a cave for years. You just need to see clearly. See that the me you've been trying to protect is not as solid as you thought. See that fear arises from clinging, and clinging arises from a mistaken belief about who you are. See that when you stop fighting to hold everything together, something opens up. A space, a lightness, a freedom you didn't know was possible. This doesn't mean you'll never feel fear again. Even the Buddha, in the forest, felt fear arise. The difference is that he didn't believe in it. He didn't let it run his life. He met it, understood it, and let it pass. And so can you. So here's my invitation to you. The next time fear visits, and it will, don't treat it as an enemy. Treat it as a messenger. Listen to what it's trying to tell you. Ask what you're holding on to. Ask what you're afraid to lose. And then ask the deepest question of all. Who is it that's afraid? If you stay with that question long enough, you might discover something extraordinary. You might find that the one who is afraid is not as real as you thought. And in that seeing, fear doesn't need to be conquered. It simply has nowhere left to stand. May you find peace, not by running from fear, but by looking straight into it. May you discover the freedom that has always been here, hidden beneath the stories you've told yourself about who you are. And may you walk through this life with an open heart, loving fully, living deeply, and no longer bound by the fear of what you might lose. Because in the end, what you truly are was never something that could be lost.